The planet Zythera 7 was unlike anything Jake Miller had ever seen. It wasn't just the shimmering purple skies or the towering crystal trees that stretched high into the clouds. It wasn't even the strange creatures with too many legs or glowing eyes that roamed freely across the landscape. What made Zythera 7 stand out was its purpose. This planet was home to the Intergalactic Academy, a school unlike any other in the galaxy. Students from countless worlds came here to learn survival skills, adaptability, and how to handle situations that would challenge even the most seasoned explorers. Jake stood at the edge of the Academy's massive landing platform, his boots planted firmly on the smooth metallic surface. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and took a deep breath. The air smelled faintly of ozone, mixed with something sweet he couldn't quite identify. Beside him, Amy Wilson shifted uncomfortably, her hands clutching the edges of her jacket as if trying to shield herself from the unfamiliar environment. Unlike Jake, who seemed calm and collected, Amy looked like she wanted nothing more than to step back onto the spaceship that had brought them here and return to Earth. "Relax," Jake said, glancing at her. His voice was steady, almost soothing. "We've been through worse." Amy shot him a skeptical look. "Worse? Jake, we're standing on an alien planet surrounded by whatever those things are." She pointed toward a group of small, furry creatures hopping around nearby. They had long ears that twitched constantly and 3 tails each. One of them let out a chirp-like sound before darting away. Jake chuckled softly. "Yeah, I know. But, trust me, this place is nothing compared to some of the stuff back home." Amy sighed but didn't argue. She knew Jake was right. Earth, their home planet, wasn't exactly a paradise. In fact, it was often referred to as a death world by other species because of its unpredictable weather, dangerous wildlife, and harsh conditions. Humans were used to dealing with threats that would make most aliens shudder. Still, being on Zythera 7 felt different. Here, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were supposed to be learning how to thrive in environments far beyond what Earth could throw at them. A loud hum filled the air as a sleek hovercraft descended onto the platform. Its doors slid open, revealing a tall figure with blue skin and 6 glowing yellow eyes. This was Professor Calyx, one of the Academy's most renowned instructors. He stepped out gracefully, his long robes flowing behind him as he approached the new arrivals. "Welcome to the Intergalactic Academy," Calyx said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am Professor Calyx, and I will be overseeing your training during your time here." Jake nodded politely while Amy gave a small wave. Around them, other students began gathering, forming a loose circle around the professor. There were beings of all shapes and sizes, some with scales, others with fur, and a few that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Each of them carried themselves differently, but one thing was clear. None of them looked entirely comfortable. Even the aliens, who likely came from planets far more advanced than Earth, seemed nervous. "As you may already know," Calyx continued, addressing the group, "this academy exists to prepare you for the challenges of the universe. You will learn to survive in hostile environments, interact with unfamiliar species, and face dangers that test your limits. Some of you may find this experience exhilarating. Others—" He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the assembled students. "May find it overwhelming." Jake caught Amy's eye and smirked. Overwhelming was putting it mildly, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he focused on the professor, listening intently. "For today's orientation," Calyx went on, "we will begin with a basic introduction to predator handling. This is a fundamental skill that every student must master, regardless of their background. Follow me." With that, the professor turned and gestured for the group to follow him. The students exchanged uncertain glances but obeyed, falling into line behind him as he led them toward a large dome-shaped building in the distance. The structure gleamed under the purple sky, its surface reflecting the light in dazzling patterns. Inside, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The temperature dropped slightly and the air grew cooler. The walls of the building were lined with transparent panels, revealing glimpses of various ecosystems beyond. Thick vines hung from the ceiling, and the sound of rushing water echoed faintly in the background. It was as though they had stepped into a completely different world. "This is our simulation arena," Calyx explained, stopping in front of a set of reinforced doors. "Here, we recreate environments from across the galaxy, allowing students to practice their skills in realistic scenarios. Today, however, we will focus on live predators." At the mention of predators, several students visibly tensed. One of them, a slender insect-like creature with iridescent wings, let out a soft clicking noise, clearly uneasy. Another, a bulky reptilian being with spiked armor, crossed its arms defiantly, though its tail flicked nervously. Calyx ignored their reactions and pressed a button on the wall. The doors slid open, revealing a large, circular chamber. Inside, a containment field shimmered faintly, holding something within its invisible barrier. As the group filed in, they got their first look at the subject of the day's lesson, a Vrinian predator. The creature was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It resembled a cross between a wolf and a scorpion, with sleek black fur covering its body and a long, segmented tail ending in a sharp stinger. Its amber eyes glowed with intelligence, and its teeth gleamed menacingly as it snarled at the intruders. Despite being trapped within the force field, it radiated raw power and aggression. "This is a Vrinian shadow beast," Calyx announced, his tone clinical. "Native to the planet Vrin 9, these predators are known for their speed, strength, and cunning. They are also highly territorial, and will attack anything they perceive as a threat." The students murmured among themselves, some leaning closer to get a better look while others instinctively stepped back. Amy gripped Jake's arm tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Do you think it can break out?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake shook his head. "Nah, that field looks solid. It's not going anywhere." Despite his reassurance, Amy didn't relax. She glanced at the other students, noting their expressions. Most of them looked terrified, while a few tried and failed to mask their fear with bravado. Only Jake seemed unfazed, standing calmly with his arms crossed as he studied the shadow beast. Calyx turned to face the class, his 6 eyes scanning the room. "Handling a live predator requires patience, precision, and understanding. It is not about brute force or domination. Your goal is to establish control without provoking unnecessary aggression. Does anyone here feel confident enough to demonstrate?" For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched awkwardly as the students avoided making eye contact with the professor. Then finally, a hand raised hesitantly. It belonged to Trelk, a Zarathian with green scales and sharp claws. He sneered as he stepped forward, clearly eager to prove himself. "I'll do it," Trelk declared, puffing out his chest. "Let's see what this earthling thinks he knows." Jake frowned, slightly, but didn't respond. He knew Trelk had been watching him closely since their arrival, sizing him up like a rival. But Jake wasn't interested in competition. All he cared about was getting through this day in one piece. "Very well," Calyx said, nodding at Trelk. "Step into the arena." Trelk strutted forward confidently, flexing his claws as he entered the containment area. The shadow beast immediately locked onto him, its tail whipping back and forth as it growled low in its throat. For a moment it seemed like Trelk might succeed. He moved cautiously, keeping his distance while attempting to assert dominance. But then, everything went wrong. The shadow beast lunged suddenly, faster than anyone expected. Trelk stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the creature's snapping jaws. Panic spread across his face as he scrambled to regain his footing, but the predator was relentless. With a swift strike of its tail, it sent Trelk sprawling to the ground. Before the situation could escalate further, Calyx activated the emergency override, causing the shadow beast to freeze mid-motion. The professor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "It seems we need a better example," he said dryly. "Perhaps someone else would care to try." Once again, silence fell over the room. No one dared to volunteer this time. That was when Calyx's gaze landed squarely on Jake. "You," the professor said, pointing directly at him. "Earthling, show us how your kind handles such creatures." Jake hesitated briefly, glancing at Amy. She gave him a small, encouraging nod, though her wide eyes betrayed her anxiety. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped forward. Jake took a deep breath as all eyes turned to him. He could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others skeptical, and a few downright hostile. Trelk, still recovering from his encounter with the shadow beast, shot Jake a glare filled with venom. It was clear the Zorathian didn't appreciate being upstaged by a human, especially not one from Earth, a planet most aliens dismissed as primitive and dangerous. Jake ignored the tension in the room. He focused instead on the task ahead. The Vrinian shadow beast stood frozen within the containment field, its amber eyes gleaming with predatory intelligence. Its tail twitched slightly, brushing against the invisible barrier that held it captive. Despite the calm demeanor Jake projected, he knew better than to underestimate the creature. Back on Earth, he'd faced predators just as deadly, though perhaps not as alien-looking. "Go ahead," Professor Kalix said, gesturing toward the arena. His tone was neutral, but there was an edge of curiosity in his 6 glowing eyes. "Show us what you're made of." Amy watched anxiously from the sidelines, her hands clasped tightly together. She wanted to call out, to tell Jake to be careful, but she bit her tongue. She knew he wouldn't thank her for drawing attention to his vulnerability. Instead, she forced herself to stay quiet, silently praying that he'd make it through this unscathed. Jake stepped into the arena without hesitation. The door slid shut behind him with a soft hiss, sealing him inside with the shadow beast. For a moment, nothing happened. The predator eyed him warily, its ears flattening against its head as it assessed the new intruder. Jake stood still, letting the creature take him in. He kept his posture relaxed, his arms loose at his sides, and avoided making any sudden movements. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of the containment field. Some of the students leaned forward, eager to see what would happen next. Others shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy about watching a fellow classmate face such a dangerous animal. Even Amy found herself holding her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the shadow beast moved. It lowered its body slightly, crouching as if preparing to pounce. Its tail swished back and forth, the sharp stinger glinting ominously in the dim light. Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, meeting the creature's gaze directly. To everyone else, it might have looked like a reckless move. But Jake understood something they didn't. Predators often responded to confidence, or the lack thereof. "You don't scare me," Jake murmured softly, his voice barely audible, over the hum of the containment field. Though none of the other students could understand his words, the tone carried meaning even across species. Calm, steady, unafraid. The shadow beast let out a low growl, testing the waters. Jake remained still, his breathing slow and controlled. Slowly, deliberately, he began to speak again, not in Galactic Standard, the universal language taught at the Academy, but in English. His voice was gentle, almost soothing, as if he were talking to a frightened dog rather than a lethal predator. Amy recognized the cadence immediately. It was the same way Jake had spoken to wild animals during their childhood adventures back on Earth. She remembered how he'd coaxed a wounded deer out of hiding once, earning its trust despite its fear. At the time, she'd thought it was pure luck. Now she realized it was skill. The shadow beast paused, its growl fading into a softer rumble. It tilted its head slightly, studying Jake with those piercing amber eyes. For a moment, it seemed almost confused. This wasn't the reaction it had expected. Most beings either froze in terror or charged recklessly, provoking an attack. But this human, this Deathworlder, was different. He wasn't running, and he wasn't fighting. He simply stood there, calm and steady, refusing to give in to fear. Professor Kalix observed the interaction with keen interest. His 6 eyes narrowed slightly as he analyzed every detail. While many species relied on technology or psychic abilities to subdue predators, Jake appeared to be using nothing but instinct and experience. It was a method so simple, so raw that it bordered on primitive, and yet it was working. Encouraged by the creature's hesitation, Jake took a step forward. The movement was slow and deliberate, giving the shadow beast plenty of time to react. When it didn't lunge or retreat, he took another step, then another, until he was close enough to reach out and touch it, if he dared. A murmur rippled through the crowd of students. Some whispered excitedly while others muttered under their breath, questioning whether Jake had lost his mind. Trelk, still nursing his pride, snorted loudly. "He's going to get himself killed," the Zorathian sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Jake ignored the comment. He was too focused on the shadow beast to care what anyone else thought. Reaching out slowly, he extended his hand toward the creature, palm facing downward in a non-threatening gesture. The shadow beast sniffed, cautiously, its nostrils flaring as it caught Jake's scent. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it lowered its head slightly, allowing him to make contact. The moment Jake's fingers brushed against the creature's fur, a collective gasp echoed through the room. No one had expected this. A human, standing toe-to-toe with a live predator and somehow earning its trust. Even Amy couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her jaw dropped slightly as she stared at Jake, her earlier anxiety melting away into awe. "That's impossible," Trelk muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. "No one can tame a shadow beast like that, not without tools or enhancements." Professor Calyx, however, remained silent. His expression was unreadable, though a hint of approval flickered in his glowing eyes. He had seen many students attempt similar feats, but none had succeeded quite like this. There was something remarkable about the way Jake handled the situation, something that went beyond mere technique. Satisfied that the shadow beast wasn't going to lash out, Jake took a small step back, maintaining eye contact the entire time. The creature followed his movements, its tail curling slightly as it relaxed. Though it was still alert, the aggressive energy that had filled the arena moments ago had dissipated entirely. "Well done," Calyx said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a note of genuine respect in his tone. "You've demonstrated remarkable control. Tell me, how did you manage to calm the beast so quickly?" Jake shrugged, stepping out of the arena as the containment field deactivated. "It's not about controlling them," he replied simply. "It's about understanding them. Predators aren't always looking for a fight. Sometimes they're just scared." The professor nodded thoughtfully, clearly intrigued by Jake's explanation. Around them, the other students began whispering among themselves, their initial skepticism giving way to admiration. Even Trelk, who had been quick to dismiss Jake earlier, now regarded him with grudging respect. As the lesson ended and the students filed out of the arena, Amy hurried to catch up with Jake. "That was incredible," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "I mean, I knew you were good with animals, but wow, just wow." Jake chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not that big a deal. Like I said, it's all about reading their behavior. You should try it sometime." Amy laughed, nervously. "Yeah, right, me? I'd probably end up getting eaten." "Not if you pay attention," Jake countered with a grin. "Besides, you've got me to teach you." For the first time since arriving on Zithera 7, Amy felt a spark of confidence. Maybe this place wouldn't be so bad after all, not with Jake by her side. Unbeknownst to them, however, their actions hadn't gone unnoticed. As they walked away, Professor Calyx lingered behind, watching them closely. Something about Jake's approach intrigued him, not just because it was effective, but because it hinted at a deeper understanding of survival than most students possessed. Whatever secrets the Deathworlder held, Calyx was determined to uncover them. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the academy in shades of violet and gold, Jake and Amy prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Little did they know, their journey was only beginning. The days following Jake's demonstration in the arena were unlike anything he or Amy had experienced before. News of his encounter with the Shadow Beast spread quickly through the academy, turning him into an unexpected celebrity among the students. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and more than a few curious glances were cast his way during meals or breaks. Some of the aliens seemed genuinely impressed, while others appeared skeptical, as if they couldn't quite believe that a human, from Earth had managed to pull off such a feat. Trelk, the Zorathian who had tried and failed to handle the predator earlier, was particularly vocal about his disbelief. He often muttered under his breath whenever Jake passed by, calling him lucky or primitive. But despite his words, there was no mistaking the flicker of respect in Trelk's eyes when he thought no one was looking. Even prideful beings like him couldn't deny skill when it stared them in the face. Amy, on the other hand, couldn't stop talking about it. She replayed every detail of Jake's interaction with the shadow beast over and over again, marveling at how calm and composed he'd been. "You make it look so easy," she said one evening as they sat together outside the academy, gazing up at the swirling purple skies, "like you've done it 100 times. Jake shrugged, leaning back against the soft, grass-like surface beneath them. "I guess I have, in a way. Back home, we don't have fancy tools or shields to protect us from predators. We learn pretty early on how to read their behavior and stay alive." Amy frowned slightly, her brow furrowing. "But still, you made it seem like second nature, like you weren't even scared." "I was scared," Jake admitted quietly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You always are when you're dealing with something that could kill you. The trick is not letting it show. Predators can sense fear. It makes them bolder, more aggressive. If you act like you belong there, like you're not afraid of them, they'll hesitate. That gives you time to figure out your next move." Amy nodded slowly, processing his words. It made sense in a way, but it didn't make it any less impressive. To her, Jake's ability to stay calm under pressure felt almost superhuman. Then again, maybe that was just what growing up on Earth did to someone. It forced you to adapt or die trying. As the week went on, Jake found himself approached by several students seeking advice. At first, he was surprised by their interest. After all, he wasn't exactly the most outgoing person at the academy, and he certainly hadn't expected anyone to take him seriously after his initial display. But as more aliens came to him with questions about survival tactics, tracking skills, and predator handling, he realized that his methods, though simple, were effective in ways that resonated with them. One afternoon, while practicing evasion drills in the simulation arena, Jake was joined by a shy-looking Jannari student named Lyra. Her skin shimmered faintly, shifting colors like oil on water, and her large, multifaceted eyes darted nervously around the room. Excuse me?" She began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could you teach me how to do what you did with the shadow beast?" Jake paused mid-movement, lowering the practice staff he'd been using. "What part specifically?" he asked, tilting, his head slightly. Lyra fidgeted with her hands, clearly uncomfortable. "How you stayed so calm. I get really nervous around predators and, well, I freeze up. My instructor says I need to work on my confidence, but..." She trailed off, her cheeks flushing a pale blue. Jake smiled reassuringly. "It's okay to be scared. Everyone gets scared. It's normal. The key is learning how to channel that fear into focus instead of letting it control you. Want to try something?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Okay." Jake led her to a corner of the arena where a holographic projection of a Vrinian shadow beast stood frozen in place. "Pretend this is real," he instructed, gesturing toward the image. "Now close your eyes and imagine yourself standing in front of it. How does it make you feel?" Lyra closed her eyes tightly, her breathing quickening. "Scared," she admitted softly. "Like it's going to attack me." "Good," Jake said. "Now picture yourself staying calm. Imagine taking slow, steady breaths. Feel your feet planted firmly on the ground. Think about how strong and capable you are. Remember, you're not helpless. You're here to learn, and that means you're already stronger than whatever's in front of you." At first, Lyra struggled to follow his instructions. Her body tensed visibly and her hands clenched into fists. But gradually, as Jake guided her through the exercise, she began to relax. When she opened her eyes again, there was a newfound determination in her expression. "Thank you," she said, smiling shyly. I think I understand now. Word of Jake's willingness to help others spread quickly, earning him even more admirers. Even Trelk eventually sought him out, though he masked his request behind thinly veiled insults. Fine, the Zarathian grumbled one day after class. Maybe you're not completely useless. Teach me your Deathworlder tricks. Jake raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he spent the next hour showing Trelk how to use subtle body language to assert dominance without provoking aggression. By the end of the session, Trelk reluctantly admitted that Jake's techniques might actually be useful, though he refused to say it outright. While Jake grew more comfortable in his role as an unofficial mentor, Amy continued to struggle with adapting to life at the academy. Unlike Jake, whose instincts and experiences gave him an edge, Amy often felt overwhelmed by the sheer strangeness of everything around her. From the alien languages buzzing in her ears to the bizarre foods served in the cafeteria, nothing seemed familiar or safe. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day, Amy confided in Jake as they explored the nearby forested area during their free time. I don't know if I can keep doing this, she admitted, kicking a small rock with her boot. Everyone else seems so confident, like they were born for this kind of thing. And then there's me, tripping over my own feet every 5 minutes. Jake stopped walking and turned to face her. You're tougher than you think, Amy. You just need to give yourself credit for getting this far. Not everyone survives being thrown into a place like this. But you do, Amy exclaimed, throwing up her hands in exasperation. You're amazing at everything they throw at you. Me? I'm lucky if I don't get eaten by some glowing plant. Jake chuckled softly, shaking his head. Trust me, I wasn't always like this. Growing up on Earth taught me how to adapt because I had to, not because I wanted to. You're smarter than you realize, and you pick things up faster than you think. Give it time. Amy sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. Time is one thing I'm not sure I have. Before Jake could respond, a rustling sound caught his attention. He held up a hand, signaling for silence, and crouched low to the ground. Peering through the dense foliage, he spotted movement, a pair of glowing eyes staring back at him from the shadows. What is it? Amy whispered, instinctively moving closer to him. Not sure, Jake replied, his voice barely audible. Stay, behind me. Carefully, he stepped forward, keeping his movement slow and deliberate. As he drew nearer, the creature revealed itself, a sleek, feline-like being with iridescent scales and a long, whip-like tail. It watched him cautiously, its posture tense but not overtly hostile. It's okay, Jake murmured, holding out a hand in a non-threatening gesture. We're not here to hurt you. To Amy's amazement, the creature relaxed slightly, its tail curling around its body as it lowered itself onto the ground. Jake knelt down, maintaining eye contact, and extended his fingers toward its snout. The feline sniffed curiously, then let out a low purring sound. How do you do that? Amy asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jake grinned over his shoulder. Told you, it's all about understanding them. As the two humans continued their exploration, neither noticed the faint trail of metallic dust left behind by the feline creature, nor did they see the small drone hovering silently above the trees, recording their every move. Somewhere deep within the academy, Professor Calix reviewed the footage with keen interest, his 6 eyes gleaming with intrigue. Whatever secrets these Deathworlders carried, they were proving far more fascinating and valuable than he had anticipated. The next few days passed in a blur for Jake and Amy. They spent most of their time balancing classes, training sessions, and the growing number of requests from fellow students eager to learn Jake's methods. Despite the attention, Jake remained humble, always quick to remind others that his techniques weren't magic. They were just practical lessons learned from years of surviving on Earth. Still, it was hard not to notice how much respect he was earning among his peers, even from those who had initially dismissed him as an outsider. Amy, on the other hand, struggled to keep up. While she admired Jake's confidence and skill, she couldn't shake the feeling that she didn't belong at the academy. Every task seemed designed to push her limits, whether it was navigating treacherous terrain or deciphering alien languages that felt impossible to master. More than once, she found herself questioning why she'd been chosen to attend such a prestigious school in the first place. One morning, after another restless night spent replaying her mistakes in her head, Amy decided to take a walk before breakfast. The academy grounds stretched out before her, bathed in the soft glow of Zethira Seven's twin suns. She wandered aimlessly, letting her thoughts drift as she tried to clear her mind. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon Jake sitting cross-legged near a small pond, tossing pebbles into the water. "Hey," she said softly, approaching him cautiously. "Mind if I join you?" Jake glanced up and smiled. "Sure. Grab a seat." Amy sat down beside him, wrapping her arms around her knees. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the gentle ripples of the water and the distant chirps of alien birds flitting between the crystal trees. Finally, Amy broke the silence. "I don't think I'm cut out for this," she admitted, staring at the ground. "Everyone else seems so capable, like they were born knowing how to handle all this stuff. Me? I feel like I'm drowning." Jake didn't respond right away. Instead, he picked up another pebble and tossed it into the pond, watching as the ripples spread outward. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Do you remember the first time we went camping back home?" Amy frowned, caught off guard by the question. "Yeah, I guess so. Why?" "You were terrified," Jake said with a grin. "You kept complaining about bugs and dirt and how uncomfortable everything was. But when it came down to it, you survived. You figured out how to start a fire, build a shelter, and even fend off a raccoon that tried to steal our food." Amy laughed despite herself. "That raccoon gave me nightmares for weeks." "Exactly," Jake said, nodding. "But you handled it, and you learned something important, that you're stronger than you think. That's what this place is about, Amy. It's not about being perfect or never making mistakes. It's about pushing yourself to grow, even when things feel impossible." Amy sighed, leaning back on her hands. "I know you're right, but it's hard not to compare myself to everyone else. Trelk, Lyra, even you. They all seem so confident. Meanwhile, I'm over here tripping over my own feet." Jake chuckled softly. "Trust me, no one starts out confident." "Not really. Take Trelk, for example. He acts like he's got everything figured out, but I've seen him mess up plenty of times. He just hides it better than most people." "That's easy for you to say," Amy muttered, though there was less bitterness in her tone now. "You make everything look effortless." "It's not," Jake replied honestly. "I screw up too, Amy, all the time. The difference is I've learned to stop beating myself up over it. Mistakes are part of the process. They teach you what works and what doesn't. So instead of focusing on what you can't do, focus on what you can do, and then build from there." Amy thought about his words for a moment, letting them sink in. As frustrating as it was to admit, Jake had a point. She'd been so focused on her failures that she hadn't taken the time to appreciate her progress, or recognize the strengths she already possessed. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay, I'll try." "Good," Jake said, giving her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "And hey, if you need help with anything, I've got your back." Before Amy could respond, a loud chime echoed across the academy grounds, signaling the start of the day's activities. Both of them stood up, brushing off their clothes as they headed back toward the main building. Along the way, they passed several groups of students chatting animatedly about their upcoming simulation exercise, a test designed to evaluate their ability to work together in hostile environments. When they arrived at the assembly hall, Professor Calyx was already waiting for them, standing atop a raised platform with his arms crossed. His 6 glowing eyes scanned the room as the students filed in, taking their seats. Once everyone was settled, he began speaking in his deep, resonant voice. "Today's exercise will require teamwork, adaptability, and quick thinking," Calyx announced. "You will be divided into teams and placed in simulated ecosystems based on various planets within the galaxy. Your objective is simple: locate and retrieve a data core hidden within the environment. However, beware. These simulations are not without risks. Predators, environmental hazards, and unforeseen challenges await you." A murmur rippled through the crowd as the students exchanged nervous glances. Even Trelk, who usually exuded confidence, looked uneasy. Jake leaned over to whisper to Amy. "This should be interesting." Calyx continued, ignoring the tension in the room. "Each team will consist of 5 members. Assignments have already been made." With a wave of his hand, holographic displays appeared above each student's head, showing their assigned teammates. To Jake and Amy's relief, they were placed on the same team along with Trelk, Lyra, and a burly Corvin named Vrax. As the teams dispersed to prepare for their missions, Jake gathered his group in a quiet corner of the hall. "All right," he said, addressing them. "We don't know what we're walking into, but we've got each other's backs. Let's stick together, stay alert, and communicate clearly. Sound good?" The others nodded, though Trelk rolled his eyes. "Easy for you to say, Deathworlder. Let's hope your skills actually work in a real challenge." Jake ignored the jab, focusing instead on formulating a plan. "Lyra, you're great at spotting details. Keep an eye out for traps or hidden dangers. Vrax, you're strong. You'll lead the way if we need to break through obstacles. Trelk, use your speed to scout ahead and check for predators. Amy and I will cover the rear and make sure no one gets left behind." Trelk opened his mouth to protest, but Lyra spoke up first. "It's a solid plan," she said quietly, her shimmering skin glowing faintly. "Let's just get through this." With their strategy in place, the team followed Calyx to the simulation chamber. The professor activated the system, and the walls dissolved into a dense jungle teeming with life. Towering trees loomed overhead, their branches dripping with bioluminescent moss. Strange calls echoed in the distance, and the air was thick with humidity. "Stay close," Jake whispered as they stepped forward. "And watch where you put your feet." They moved cautiously, scanning the area for signs of danger. Within minutes, they encountered their first obstacle, a river filled with sharp-toothed creatures lurking just beneath the surface. Trelk scouted ahead, reporting back quickly. "There's a fallen tree we can use as a bridge," he said, pointing upstream. Vrax led the way, testing the stability of the makeshift crossing before allowing the others to follow. One by one, they made it across safely, though Amy nearly slipped halfway through. Jake caught her arm, steadying her until she regained her footing. "Thanks," she murmured, her cheeks flushing slightly. "No problem," Jake replied with a grin. "Just don't let Trelk see. He might start charging for rescue services." The comment earned a rare laugh from Amy, lightening the mood as they pressed onward. Hours passed as they navigated the treacherous terrain, facing everything from venomous plants to ambush predators. Through it all, Jake's leadership kept the team grounded, ensuring they stayed focused and worked together. Finally, as dusk began to fall in the simulation, they reached the location of the data core, a cave guarded by a massive insect-like creature with razor-sharp mandibles. The team froze, unsure of how to proceed. But Jake stepped forward, his expression calm and determined. "Leave this to me," he said quietly. "I'll distract it. The rest of you grab the core and get out of here." "No way," Amy protested immediately. "You're not doing this alone." "I agree," Trelk added, surprising everyone. "If anyone's going in there, we're doing it together." For a moment, Jake hesitated. Then he nodded, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "All right, stay close and follow my lead." With careful coordination, the team managed to lure the creature away from the cave entrance, allowing Lyra and Vrax to retrieve the data core, while Jake and Trelk kept the predator occupied. By the time the mission ended and the simulation faded away, they were exhausted, but victorious. As they returned to the assembly hall, Professor Calyx regarded them with approval. "Well done," he said simply. "Not every team succeeds in retrieving the core. You've proven that cooperation and adaptability can overcome even the greatest challenges." Jake glanced at his teammates, sharing a small smile with Amy. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt a spark of pride, not just in herself but in what they had accomplished together. Maybe, just maybe, she belonged here after all. The success of their simulation exercise brought a newfound sense of unity to Jake's team. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Amy felt like she was truly part of something bigger than herself. The shared victory and the challenges they had overcome together had forged a bond between them that went beyond mere camaraderie. Even Trelk, who had initially resented Jake's leadership, seemed to soften slightly, though he still made sure to mask his respect with sarcastic remarks. Over the next few days, life at the academy settled into a rhythm. Classes continued, each one pushing the students to their limits in new and unexpected ways. There were lessons on deciphering alien languages, navigating zero-gravity environments, and even surviving extreme weather conditions simulated within the academy's advanced facilities. While Amy still struggled with some tasks, she found herself improving little by little, thanks in part to Jake's encouragement and the support of her teammates. Jake, meanwhile, became something of a legend among the student body. His ability to handle predators and navigate dangerous situations with calm precision earned him both admiration and curiosity. More students approached him for advice, eager to learn the Deathworlder tricks that seemed to set him apart. Despite the attention, Jake remained grounded, always quick to remind others that his methods weren't magical. They were simply practical skills honed through years of experience. One evening, after a long day of training, Jake and Amy decided to take a break and explore the nearby forested area surrounding the academy. It had become a sort of tradition for them, a chance to unwind and escape the constant pressure of classes and simulations. As they walked along a narrow path lined with glowing plants, Amy broke the silence. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think I'm finally starting to get the hang of this place." Jake glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. "Really? That's a first." Amy playfully nudged him with her elbow. "Hey, don't make fun of me, I mean it. I still mess up sometimes, but I don't feel as lost as I used to." "That's because you're not giving yourself enough credit," Jake replied with a grin. "You've come a long way since we got here. Remember how freaked out you were about those glowing bugs during our first week?" Amy groaned, covering her face with her hands. "Don't remind me, I swear I thought they were going to eat my face off." "They just wanted to say hi," Jake teased, chuckling softly. "But seriously, Amy, you're tougher than you think. You've been handling everything they've thrown at you, and you're getting better every day." Amy smiled faintly, feeling a warm sense of pride wash over her. She knew Jake wasn't one to hand out compliments lightly, so his words meant a lot. Still, there was something nagging at the back of her mind, something she hadn't quite figured out yet. "Do you ever wonder why they chose us?" she asked suddenly, her voice quieter now. "Out of all the people on Earth, why did they pick us to come here?" Jake shrugged, kicking a small rock off the path. "Maybe because we're survivors. Back home, we grew up dealing with stuff most aliens can't even imagine. Maybe they saw that and thought we could handle whatever this place throws at us. Or maybe they just needed someone to clean up after the aliens," Amy joked, though there was a hint of uncertainty in her tone. Jake laughed, shaking his head. "Whatever the reason, we're here now, and honestly, I think we're doing okay." As they continued their walk, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, stories from their childhood, funny moments from class, and wild theories about what awaited them in the coming weeks. They didn't notice the faint trail of metallic dust scattered across the ground, or the subtle hum of machinery hidden beneath the forest floor. But deep within the academy, someone was watching. Professor Kalik sat in his private office, reviewing footage captured by tiny drones disguised as insects. The recording showed Jake and Amy wandering through the forest, laughing and talking as if they didn't have a care in the world. To anyone else, it might have looked like an ordinary evening stroll, but to Calix it was anything but. He leaned back in his chair, his 6 glowing eyes narrowing slightly as he analyzed the scene. Something about these two humans intrigued him. Not just their resilience or adaptability, but the way they interacted with their surroundings. Most students relied heavily on technology or psychic abilities unique to their species. Jake and Amy, however, seemed to operate on instinct alone, drawing on skills that were raw, unpolished, and yet remarkably effective. Calix tapped a clawed finger against the desk, deep in thought. He had seen countless students pass through the academy over the years, each one bringing their own strengths and weaknesses to the table. But these Deathworlders were different. Their approach to survival was unconventional, almost primitive, and yet, it worked. There was a lesson to be learned here, though Calyx wasn't entirely sure what it was yet. As he mulled over the possibilities, another piece of information caught his attention. Earlier that day, one of the Academy's maintenance drones had detected unusual activity near the environmental control systems. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a routine malfunction. But upon closer inspection, the readings suggested tampering, deliberate interference with the system designed to regulate the Academy's simulated ecosystems. Calyx frowned, his expression darkening. This wasn't the first time such anomalies had been reported. Over the past few weeks, there had been several incidents involving unauthorized modifications to the Academy's infrastructure. Each case had been dismissed as minor vandalism or accidental damage caused by overzealous students. But now, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Curious, Calyx accessed the security logs, searching for any clues that might shed light on the situation. What he found was troubling. Several students, including a few senior members of the Academy, had accessed restricted areas of the facility without proper authorization. Their movements were erratic, often occurring late at night when most of the staff and students were asleep. Even more concerning was the fact that none of them had provided adequate explanations for their actions. Calyx's suspicions grew as he reviewed the data. Whatever was happening, it went far beyond harmless mischief. Someone or something was deliberately undermining the Academy's operations, and he intended to find out why. Deciding to investigate further, Calyx activated a series of surveillance drones and dispatched them to monitor key locations throughout the facility. If there was a conspiracy brewing within the Academy, he would uncover it and deal with it accordingly. Unaware of the professor's growing concerns, Jake and Amy returned to their quarters later that evening, exhausted but content. As they parted ways, Amy hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Jake. "Thanks for tonight," she said softly. "I needed that." Jake smiled, giving her a reassuring nod. "Anytime. Get some rest, okay?" Amy nodded and headed to her room, closing the door behind her. She flopped down onto her bed, staring up at the ceiling as her thoughts drifted. For the first time in weeks, she felt hopeful. Maybe this place wasn't so bad after all. Little did she, or anyone else, know that trouble was brewing just beneath the surface. Somewhere deep within the Academy, plans were being made. Plans that could change everything. And when the truth came to light, Jake and Amy would find themselves at the center of a storm they could never have anticipated. The next morning, Jake woke up to the sound of his alarm blaring in his ear. He groaned, reaching out to shut it off before rolling out of bed. The events of the previous evening lingered in his mind, his conversation with Amy, their walk through the forest, and the sense that something was subtly different about the Academy. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was an undercurrent of unease he couldn't shake. As he got ready for the day, Jake noticed a strange message blinking on the screen of his personal communicator. It wasn't from anyone he recognized, and the text was brief. "Meet me outside the simulation arena at dawn, alone." There was no signature, just those few cryptic words. Jake frowned, debating whether to ignore it or investigate further. Curiosity won out. Grabbing a jacket, he slipped out of his room quietly, careful not to wake Amy, who was still asleep in her quarters nearby. When he arrived at the designated spot, he found Professor Calyx waiting for him. The Zarnian's towering figure stood, silhouetted against the rising suns, his 6 glowing eyes fixed intently on Jake. Without preamble, the professor spoke. "I need your help," Calyx said, his deep voice cutting through the early morning silence. "There is something happening within the Academy that requires discretion." Jake blinked, caught off guard. "My help? What kind of trouble are we talking about?" Calyx hesitated for a moment before answering. "Over the past few weeks, there have been reports of unauthorized activity near the environmental control systems. Someone has been tampering with them, altering parameters that could destabilize the entire facility. I suspect foul play, but I cannot act openly without evidence. Jake crossed his arms, his brow furrowing. You think someone inside the academy is doing this? Why? That is what I need you to find out, Calyx replied. Your instincts, and your ability to adapt, are unmatched among the students. If anyone can uncover the truth, it is you. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. This was not exactly how he'd planned to spend his day. Still, he knew better than to turn down a request like this, not when the stakes were potentially so high. All right, he said finally. What do you want me to do? Start by observing, Calyx instructed. Look for anything unusual. Students, acting strangely, areas of the academy that seem off limits or signs of sabotage. Report back to me directly if you discover anything significant. With that, the professor turned and walked away, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. As he made his way back toward the main building, he realized he couldn't tackle this on his own. He needed Amy's help. Later that afternoon, Jake pulled Amy aside after class. They found a quiet corner of the library where they could talk without being overheard. I've got a problem, Jake began, lowering his voice. And I think it might involve everyone here. Amy raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What kind of problem? Jake explained everything, the mysterious message, Calyx's request, and the suspicion of sabotage within the academy. By the time he finished, Amy's expression had shifted from curiosity to concern. This sounds serious, she said, leaning closer. Do you really think someone here is trying to hurt the academy? I don't know, Jake admitted. But if Calyx is worried enough to ask for my help, it's probably bad news. We need to figure out what's going on before things get worse. Amy nodded, determination replacing her initial hesitation. Okay, let's do it. Where do we start? Jake smiled faintly, grateful for her support. We stick together and keep our eyes open. If anyone's acting suspicious, we'll notice. Over the next several days, Jake and Amy worked tirelessly to gather information. They split, their time between attending classes and investigating potential leads, always careful not to draw attention to themselves. During one late-night exploration of the maintenance tunnels beneath the academy, they stumbled upon something startling. A hidden room filled with advanced equipment and stacks of data chips. What is all this? Amy whispered, her voice barely audible as she scanned the cluttered space. Jake picked up one of the data chips, examining it closely. Looks like plans for some kind of upgrades? Maybe modifications to the predators used in training exercises? Amy frowned, piecing it together. You don't think someone's using the academy to illegally enhance these creatures, do you? It would explain the tampering, Jake muttered grimly. Whoever's behind this isn't playing by the rules. Before they could investigate further, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor outside. Jake quickly grabbed Amy's arm, pulling her into the shadows as two figures entered the room. One was Trelk, his green scales glinting faintly in the dim light. The other was a senior student named Rhynex, a hulking Quarvan known for his competitive streak. We're running out of time, Rhynex growled, his voice low. If Calyx finds out what we're doing, we're finished. He won't, Trelk snapped, his tone sharp. Just make sure the next batch of beasts is ready for the fight. The buyers are paying top credits for exclusivity. Jake and Amy exchanged a shocked glance. Their suspicions had been correct. Someone was using the academy for illegal activities, but the scale of the operation was far greater than either of them had imagined. Once the coast was clear, Jake and Amy hurried back to report their findings to Calyx. The professor listened intently, his expression unreadable as they recounted everything they'd seen and heard. This confirms my worst fears, Calyx said after a long pause. They are breeding enhanced predators for underground gladiatorial matches. These fights attract wealthy patrons from across the galaxy, fueling a dangerous black market. What happens now? Amy asked, her voice trembling slightly. Calyx's gaze hardened. Now we stop them. With Calyx leading the charge, a plan was set into motion. Jake and Amy recruited Trelk, who reluctantly agreed to cooperate after realizing the gravity of the situation, and a small group of trusted classmates to assist in exposing the conspiracy. Using Jake's knowledge of predator behavior and Amy's knack for spotting details, they devised a strategy to infiltrate the rogue faction's operations. The climax came during a secret match held in an underground arena hidden beneath the academy. Jake led the team into the heart of the operation, navigating traps and avoiding detection until they reached the central chamber. Inside, genetically modified hybrids snarled and thrashed in reinforced cages, their eyes glowing with unnatural intensity. When the final confrontation occurred, Jake faced off against the largest and most deadly predator he'd ever encountered, a hybrid beast engineered to be faster, stronger, and more aggressive than anything natural. Drawing on every ounce of skill and courage, Jake managed to subdue the creature without causing harm, disabling the arena's defenses in the process. As alarms blared and reinforcements flooded the area, the rogue faction was caught red-handed. Evidence of their crimes was broadcast across the academy, ensuring that justice would be served. Trelk, though initially reluctant, played a crucial role in dismantling the operation, earning a measure of redemption in the process. In the aftermath, Jake and Amy stood side by side, watching as order was restored to the academy. Though exhausted, they felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had faced danger head-on and emerged victorious, not just for themselves, but for everyone who called the academy home. Professor Calyx approached them, his 6 eyes gleaming with approval. "You have done well," he said simply. "Perhaps there is wisdom in the ways of your Deathworld after all." Jake grinned, glancing at Amy. "Guess we proved that Earth has a few tricks worth learning." Amy laughed softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she truly believed it, not just about Earth, but about herself. She belonged here alongside Jake, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And as the twin suns of Zithra 7 dipped below the horizon, casting the academy in hues of violet and gold, Jake and Amy prepared for the next chapter of their journey. Whatever it held, they knew they'd face it together,